And from the Atlanta mayoral race to many other elections all across the country, we're diving into what's at stake on November 2nd for Black communities. Joining us is Democrat and former member of the Georgia House of Representatives, J. Craig Gordon, CEO of the New Georgia Project, Nsé Ufot, former Speaker of the Oklahoma House of Representatives and Republican, T.W. Shannon, and writer for the Foundation for Economic Education, Olivia Rondo. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, Olivia, I want to start with you. Now, we know historically that the Black electorate has showed up a bit less for special elections. Now, given that and recent claims of voter suppression, Black voters who do indeed stay home for this election, do you think that will be by choice or due to voter suppression?
I think it will have to be by choice, and it is no joke that voter suppression has certainly hindered the ability of Black Americans to vote throughout history. Just right now with this new Republican bill, I do have my criticisms of it, but I do believe that it won't hinder people from voting who actually want to vote.
I hear you. J. Craig, I want to speak specifically about Atlanta and what's at stake for the Black community there, considering this new controversial law that Olivia and I were discussing. How do you think that will affect the voter turnout and the conditions in general in the A?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us. Unfortunately, I think African Americans, as it relates to, labor sources, whether we're talking about Atlanta, San Antonio, Savannah, LA, tend to work longer hours and more specifically, jobs that just don't align themselves with normal voting hours. And so I think, what this Republican legislature has done in Georgia, along with Republican legislatures across the country, is come up with a solution for a problem that frankly just doesn't exist. I love this country, and I think it's it's not debatable that this country loves sports. Can you imagine if the regulations that have been put in Georgia's voting system were applied to football? I mean, if you just take 3 to 5 of the egregious things put on voting and applied them to sports, it would be a January 6th event on every park in America.
I hear that. Nsé, let me ask you this. Do you see this Atlanta mayoral election as being a bit of a litmus test as to the ultimate impact, the discriminatory impact, many allege, as it relates to these Georgia voting laws?
Yes, and here's why. One, the Georgia's voting laws, particularly Senate Bill 202, is trash. That there are easily 50 additional provisions that are designed to make it more difficult for citizens to vote, to participate in our democracy. And so not only are there mayoral elections in Atlanta, but there are over 1,600 municipal elections happening in Georgia on November 2nd. And so there are going to be over 1,600 opportunities to see just exactly how these anti-voting provisions are going to have an impact on Americans' ability to participate in our elections.
So I want to bring TW into the conversation. TW, can you elaborate a bit on the conservative claim that Georgia's new voting laws actually expand the rights and access for citizens, as alleged by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp?
Thank you, Ebony. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you. The Georgia voting law, I think, is really a great example of how the GOP is committed to actually expanding voter rights. I think in the bill, the main important parts of it that I want to point out is that the bill actually expands the number of early voting days and hours, including mandating early voting on Saturday. It also allows the observation of tabulation, scanning, and duplication of ballots. This bill also allows the processing of ballots prior to election day. I mean, I think the election night reporting requirement ensures that all ballots must be counted by the end of election night. And I think that will ensure that votes have results without having to wait days or even weeks to get it tabulated. So again, I think this bill is actually an example of how the GOP is committed to expanding voter rights, not limiting them.
Okay. Now, per that example, TW, what's your response to those who say not allowing water and food, snacks, while in extremely long lines for, I think the point J. Craig made was interesting. Black voters and people of color often do work jobs that have less 9 to 5 hours, making showing up for the allotted voting time a little bit more difficult. How do those restrictions of food and water serve to access more voters?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of Democrat false outrage about the solicitation zone, but actually what it includes is giving food and water by proper personnel. It just doesn't allow political activists to do that and to include their merchandise and their materials that might persuade voters in line. There's a reason that those laws have existed for a number of years. It's because election workers are still allowed to provide water, and it allows for self-service water stations as well. So this farce that somehow the law is going to limit access to people having food and water it's really almost insulting to think that because you're African American, you have to be fed, bread and water in order to vote. It's just not true.
What do you expect to see in terms of similarities in what's going to happen on November 2nd in states like Georgia and Texas and other places where these voting laws have been so egregious?
Well, I think unfortunately for the Republicans, I think that a lot of the provisions they put in their new bill, I don't think it will help the state go red. I don't necessarily think that preventing people from handing out water or snacks in a line is going to enforce election integrity. However, I can say I don't live in Georgia. I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about the Georgia State Board of Elections. However, I did live in Pennsylvania, a important swing state during the 2020 election, and I can say that the State Board of Elections there definitely needed some type of bill to strengthen election integrity. I received probably 4 to 5 absentee ballots that were my own to my address of people who didn't live there. So I think there are problems, and I think that the bill addressed some of those problems. But again, I don't think it's really going to secure the election. It seems like more of a virtue signal.
Hey y'all, now for full episodes of Revolt Black News, tune into Revolt TV. And if your cable provider doesn't carry it, make sure you reach out and let them know that you're trying to join the revolution. I'll see y'all every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on Revolt.